Thank you. I was somewhat remiss in including my background in architecture. I know it's a room full of engineers, so forgive me, pardon me. We're just the glue in between. Turns out my mother was right. I am an engineer. When I went into architecture school, she's like, "You're an engineer. Don't do that." I did it anyway. Had fun. So thank you all for being here. The way I came to be up here talking to you today is that Sadie delivered a workshop to the Texas Army National Guard. Long story short, we saved 20% off our total energy spend at those facilities. That sounds great, right? That's what we all want to do. We want to get out there, have a talk, get people in a room, have action happen, and just see the results in the data, just like that. So maybe that's how it works. Maybe they're at that CFO's just ready to pull the trigger and has his checkbook, maybe. Usually not. And what will happen is someone will have a bright idea. They'll contract an energy audit or a benchmarking study or other duties as assigned someone to look into this and bring opportunities to them. They go through that process and then nothing happens from there. So we'll talk about how do you mitigate these reports just collecting dust, because back when I was in the Guard, we had shelves and shelves full of binders that just collected dust, and you don't want your report to go on the dust shelf. From there, we'll talk about quacking like a duck. That's all you're going to get about that, because that's very important. And then how to make your data work for you, and we'll go over a few examples of how this works. So how many people in here manage resources for your own organization? How many people analyze other people's resources? And how many people might deliver projects? Awesome. I got to quack like all sorts of ducks right now, so that's awesome. Good to know. What I want to emphasize is as we get past the collect the data, deliver the data in a concerted way, get your triggers ready. Just because your data is old doesn't mean it's irrelevant necessarily. Maybe it does. So what impacts the relevancy of this data, and how do you keep it fresh and motivating for your organization? Occupancy changes. You might need to relook at this again and again, but maybe your organization doesn't want to fund another study, so you need to apply some rational logic to those changes. Building system upgrades, probably just throw the data out. It's really time to re-benchmark and reassess what is the performance now. Leadership changes. Are they operating the building differently? Are they running 5/8s instead of 4/10s? The factory's running longer. What changed there? Rate structure. Just because your data's good and your occupancy didn't change, does your rate structure change? And does that impact what decisions you make from that data that you've already collected? Are interest rates changing? Do we need to start triggering more? Do we need to get ahead of anything that's going to put your savings opportunities at risk? And then budget changes. Are you short of money? Is now the time to start really getting in front of the people and saying, hey, now's the time, guys. Remember this thing? So the other thing that I feel like has happened in the industry is historically, and correct me if I'm wrong, energy management has been delivered as Wizard of Oz, energy manager, behind a curtain, in a corner, told to go over there and fix it and just do that. And they come out every now and then, they're like, hey guys, $1 million, hey guys. And that's kind of where it ends. And they're the ones that are always the maintenance staff. So personal story, I took over as the energy manager, and all the maintenance techs, we had 80 maintenance techs, would, I'm not kidding you, turn around in the hallway and walk away from me. I'm serious. I mean, they really would turn around. Because they had been delivered black boxes that they couldn't manage, that didn't work for them, that they had to bypass and fix and override. Making sure that your data is relevant and what you're doing is effective for them is going to help you get that action before it goes stale. Momentum is a finite thing. If you have someone's attention, if they've just come to your presentation, that's the time to ask for the yes. That's the time to say, here's a proposal, here's how we can take this out to bid, here's how we fund it, and get them to take that action right then and there, when they're triggered, when their ability is high, they just ate donuts, or you've been delivering Tiff's treats. There's a cookie delivery in our area on a weekly basis to your finance office, just because you like them, just in case. From there, Once you've figured out that you have relevant data, this is good, this is something that I should advocate for, I should put my neck on the line in my organization for this, then you gotta be the Peking duck, right? So, full disclosure, I didn't practice this. Can anybody else do that? All right. Usually I'll stand up here until you do, but I won't do that. So the most important part about what Sadie was talking about, and I took a ton of notes during their presentations because it was really giving me flashbacks, but you have got to translate your message into something that works for them. So, how old is too old on this information? We just went over that. I'm going to go to the next slide. This is the slide I was looking for. So, did you know that a group of ducks is called a raft? Red-breasted merganser. Yeah, we got a yes on a merganser. 100 miles an hour a duck can fly. Mallard was hit at 21,000 feet. So the point is, all of these ducks have different abilities. Your CFO is really good at being a CFO, right? Your building operator is really good at running that building and getting comfort to your occupants. So don't discredit them because they're not talking your language or they don't translate what you're trying to tell them into value and their perspective. They all have their strengths and their skill sets that are going to get you to get that project to be what you want it to be. Did you know that a duck's quack doesn't echo? That's a myth. Where has your spam emails been all your life? So, and this is what gave me this idea, because I was giving one of these talks and I said, well, you don't want to be in an echo chamber, but really it doesn't echo, but you have to be talking the same thing that they're talking. So if it's a school, it needs to be test scores. The teachers are not motivated necessarily by budgets until you can help them connect that trigger of the pain they experience when they get a no to their curriculum enhancement is directly related to them having 8 lamps in their room, right? Until you can connect that dot for them in a way that they understand, you've got to message in that way. We're all engineers. If I went in, to a standard controller's office and said, did you know that your kilowatt hours were a megawatt too high? He'd say, what did you just say to me? If I told him, did you know that your loss of revenue in Q3 could be overcome by, harvesting all these savings in your building? So one district in Texas, I don't know if you are familiar, in 2008 there was a little issue. They cut all of the school funding, and one district, they did not lay a single person off. They intentionally and holistically went into a full energy harvesting mode and protected every job in that district by saving $1 million annually on their energy spend. That's Conroe ISD. So they only did that, and they only got the buy-in from the staff and the principals and administrators because they translated it into your custodians are going to be laid off. Your special needs teachers are going to be laid off. This is why it matters to you. So you have to translate. The other thing that I want to emphasize here for all of us, since we're in the industry and we get it and we know, I don't know if any of you have had a hard time giving away money. It's really hard. You're telling people, this project pays for it. My projects are the only projects that pay for themselves. Why is this hard to understand? Well, it is. But you have got to not stop at the energy savings. The bill savings, like Bill was referring to, are not the end, right? It's increased comfort. It's higher test scores. It's reduced absenteeism. It's productivity. It's recruiting. If you have a nice facility, you're going to recruit. If this was a corporate entity, you're going to recruit better, employees, and all of that down the line. So you can't just stop at your bill savings, and then build on every value that you have in that project, translate it into what triggers them, and get them to get past their no and start buying into it. So the other thing that I want to emphasize here when we're talking about analyzing this data and benchmarking, it is a hint, it's not an answer. Because your facility is the highest user in the portfolio doesn't mean it's a bad building or it has a bad operator. It might have a terrible operator, might not. It might be that it runs, if it was a night school for adults, or a GED program, or a technical, photo, dark room stuff at night, I don't know. But that's not the answer. So, we went through this process, and when you take this out, when you take these concepts of benchmarking out, first of all, get a third party to do it, if you can, because you've been looking at this in the same way over and over again, and you don't see the things that other people are going to see. So we did this, and one of our facility maintenance shops was through the roof. And I'm calling the utility. I'm like, there's no way this meter, like the service panel on my building would be melting if it was using this much energy. Come to find out, long story short, there was a community baseball field that was installed behind our building, passed through our meter, that was running 1,000-watt lamps, like 55 of them, 8 hours a night, every night, probably left on, I don't know. I ended up funding a project at that building before I found out that it was a fine project. The measures were still good measures, but because there was that data anomaly from a third party, we had looked at that building over and over again and had just never gone through this process in this way. So those are the things that you can find, but it's a hint, it's not an answer. Well, because that building was our worst performer doesn't mean it was our least efficient building, as it turned out. So you take all that, you translate it, you get people in the room, you feed them, you get people in the room again, you feed them, you get people in the room, you feed them. It's a process. I think we've all been through this. So, you know, what we've found, and I took over the program that Sadie was doing, so I'm at about 35 now, not quite 170, but it works. You know, it worked for our organization, and I really believe in it, and delivering this message to non-energy folks so that they understand it's really in their best interest, and we're not just here to make them uncomfortable and turn their lights off. Those people who went through the benchmark and workshop were about 48% of the participants took 3/4 of the savings. So it got them to take deeper projects, more holistic projects, fund things they probably wouldn't have funded otherwise. So they really grew this impact into a bigger piece of that intervention. Remember, as you're delivering this message to your organization, like Sadie said, it's incrementalism. We're not going to build Rome in a day, and so we need to set up wins. The other thing you want to do is set up that pleasure system so that you reinforce that behavior. So if you're going to do an action, make sure that you can prove that it worked, and set yourself up to build step by step on some successes that you can highlight. We did a mock building program with all of our different facilities, and the first time I did it, I hit send, and I am not exaggerating. My phone rang about 3 seconds later. And I was like, hello? And it was one of the commanders at one of the units, and he was like, ma'am, I don't believe you. I was like, well, I just basically copied and pasted your bill into something that had our letterhead on it. But, you know, it was taking that step to get them to understand the scale of spend, and he was afraid that his unit funds were going to have to pay this bill, and they did not have it. So that was a pain point, that was a fear. And then, we did that over and over again, and that got us the ability to start training the OICs, the officers and the non-commissioned officers in their annual training. It took us showing them the cost that's coming from their units, because if it goes into the electricity bucket, it does not go into any other bucket. As much as we love the utilities, we want it to go to the functional buckets, not the utility buckets. And so then we got to train their officers, and then we connected the dots on how this is a mission critical, life, health, safety, how do you deliver fuel and a forward operating base, translate the message, but it was all those incremental, do a billing program, follow up with them, ask them to change something that they're doing in their building, show them it worked, start training them. All those little bitty steps got us to a point where, I don't think you know this, but we probably funded $2.5 million after your workshop. We did an alternative utility energy savings contract that had never been done by the National Guard. We did the state SECO energy conservation financing that had never been done by the state agency. And then we did a legislative appropriation for our bottom quartile of facilities. All of that came from going through the systematic process, one little bite at a time. And it didn't just happen like that. So, focus in your incremental interventions with the low-hanging fruit. Don't get ahead of yourself. It's not going to do you any favors, and you're just going to spin your reels and wonder why people they're not listening, because you're Wizard of Ozing the gears and they're not understanding what you mean. The other thing we did was we educated our technicians. The building operator course, I actually put 12 of my technicians through. I recommend when you do operational education that you educate your managers as well, right? Because they're the decision makers, and when the technician brings them a project, they need to understand why is this technician saying this and why should I say yes? So operator and their manager. Awesome. And then reward success. So when a building, this is funny, when a readiness center would achieve their savings goals with us, you know what their reward was? And it's so ironic. It was a big ass fan. So I was putting in a motor in their facility, but they had drill halls and it gave them increased comfort, and that's what they wanted. All they wanted was a big ass fan. I can say that, it's their name. So, you know, that's really what it's all about, is give people a carrot. Maybe you don't have a stick at the end, but you do have a nudge, right? Some feedback for them, and then some reward at the end. This is the golden circle of energy management. And I'm not sure kind of where in your perspectives of you know, those of you who manage the energy for your organizations, if you can't get a revolving fund, start with your incentive rebates if you get any, if you qualify for any. Try and carve those out with a policy, get leadership to understand that it's gonna go to the same thing anyway. It's better if it snowballs. And you know, I had federal finance regulation on my side, so when the director of the state agency said, I want your incentives, I said, nice try. But I think the federal government has an issue with that, sir. So, and it really, you know, so from there, what happened was those technicians who ran away from me then saw me as Miss Moneybags, right? And would come to me and say, hey, my compressor just went down. Can you give me that $1,200? That's the difference for the next one. Because they knew I had the money to back it up. I didn't just say you should do this. I said you should do this, let me help you. And come to me, because maybe there's an alternative financing. Maybe there's something I know about that you don't. But if they're not talking to you, they're going to be doing things. So another anecdote, and then I think I'm going to wrap up a little bit. I had funded a big project, and the maintenance guys, with the best of intentions, had replaced all the T12s. There went all my savings, right? But that goes to keeping the communications going on those increments and making sure that you're communicating with everyone you need, and then put everything back into that snowball. So what they were doing is they were saving their budgets and then investing it into that. And I was like, no, I have the snowball bucket. Don't use your money for the snowball bucket, right? So some concepts, and I'm not sure how close I am to time. I'm going to keep talking until I get waved off. Financing is not evil. How many people have credit card debt? Sure, that's fine, I get it. How many people paid for their car in cash? I did too, but it was a cheap old car, that's fine. How many people bought their home with cash? Yeah, well, maybe someday. By and large, but so there are times. So finance is kind of a scary booga word in our society, and rightfully so. Some finance is bad, but it's basically what built our economy. And when it can get you a value beyond the cost to service the debt, that's when you really should pursue that option. So this is a quick example. If this, you know, let's say that this organization had a lighting project. It's about $50,000. It's got a simple payback of 5 years. They could take 50 grand out of their budget. They're never going to see that 50 grand back for 2 years, right? So they're down 50 for 2 years. They also have the opportunity to finance it. Maybe they have a local bank who said, hey, you know, Mr. School District, I think you have a good credit rating and we'd love to make some interest off you. Great. What happened was, instead of being down 50 grand, right, 25 grand a year, but really you're out this budget 50 grand no matter what, they serviced the debt with the interest for, I want to say that was 12, right? They saved 25. It's a 2-year payback. It's T12s to LEDs. So they're cash positive $13,000 in their budget. So they made a decision. They added money to their capital budget. That little project, if you can do just one little one of those to prove the concept, we did a little $50,000 lighting retrofit for the SECO loan, and then we got approval to do a lot more. When you prove to them that this, and like you said, follow up and make sure that it hits the budget, did this work? Did this actually increase your budget, or did, you know, how did this really work? When they see that, you know, diversifying how they fund things can make them cash flow positive, it will get you a lot further than just saying, you should just pull $1 million out and change this, you know, chiller system. That's not going to happen. But if you brought them an option that said you could change the chiller system, service the debt for this amount. By the way, interest is low right now, so do it now. And be cash flow positive. One of the real estate guys that is somewhat of a mentor to me gave a talk, and he said, The venture capital firms, his mentor told him, you worship your cash flow more than your mother. So in a small business, and I know we have small businesses in the room, cash flow is important, and if you can get positive cash flow, even if you have to finance it, that will keep you afloat to get to that next project, to get to that next win. So how does this work? It works. I promise. I did it. It really did work. They're doing amazing things. This is just one example. Alvin ISD, this is really just the benchmark and workshop process. From that, they internally built the coalition of support to do $700,000 annually in savings for that school district. That goes a long way to field trips, buses, curriculum, special needs, things that it needs to go to, not to the utility. They're not in here, I can say that. A ton of energy they saved. And this is year over year over year over year over year over year. So she's like, I got $1 million project approved. She has been delivering annual savings year over year since the intervention. She and Bill and everyone else who goes through these processes, every time they see that savings, that goes on every year, as long as they're checking in and maintaining it and keeping up with it, because it will go stale. Another one, this is more the behavior and operations. This is where we had benchmarked and did a workshop with these organizations and identified that they could get their base load down. First year, 3 districts saved $370,000 just with low cost, no cost, basically turning their buildings off during winter break, summer break. We didn't make anyone uncomfortable. We didn't kick students out. We didn't, make their air really humid because we didn't wring out the moisture. None of that. Really just opportunities, shut it down when you're not around. That's essentially all it is, by and large. Don't have unnecessary things, but shut it down when you're not around is really it. Second year, they grew exponentially because once you lay the foundation, then they can just operate it. Then their technicians know the importance of managing their schedule. The principals know the importance of, do I approve a chess club on Tuesday and volleyball on Thursday, or do I say, hey, both of you can come on Wednesday, and you can take this wing, not that wing, because it only operates this part of the building. So once you get to that level and the organization builds that muscle, the other idea is in year 3, we walk away and they have this, right? This is commissioning, I call surgery. It's like open heart surgery. Operations and behavior intervention is Weight Watchers. It's, you got to check in, you got to keep up with it. You got to get on the scale. You got to keep talking about it. You got to keep going to the gym. You get fit. You're like, I still got to work out. Dang it! That's what happens to me every time. So the other thing, this is I'm not going to go too far into the weeds on what they did, but they were recognized by the state legislature of Texas, which is a big thing. I don't know if you about politics in Texas, but they did. This was read on the Senate floor, and it was an acknowledgement of all of the work of that program. They ended up getting. I don't know what the figure was, but somewhere near double their traditional appropriations, because they demonstrated to the Legislative Budget Office that they're managing their resources correctly. So it wasn't just the energy savings, it was then their normal capital budgets were viewed in a better light. So it's not necessarily just the energy savings. Like I said, first state finance project, first federal finance project, first master plan endorsed by the command group. Thank you, Miss Sadie Bronk. Educating the officers, like getting time during an annual training is a big deal. So all of those things happen from this process. Just a few things to reiterate from the previous presentations. How you represent the data matters. I can't take a spreadsheet to a general or a superintendent, right? He just wants to look at the squares. And he just wants to know, how is he compared to everybody else? That's really that's the motivating factor for most people. Am I winning? And can I tell if I'm winning easily? Competition motivate. Anyone in here an Oilers fan? No? Just checking. So, really, the other thing to think about is, in your organization, or if you're presenting to an organization, baselines for every building are difficult. So if there's a way to compare to other similar building types, that's one thing, that's great, but maybe they don't operate the same way. Can you compare both internally and externally? How are we doing? How are all of our elementary schools doing compared to each other? And maybe that's just a function of how our organization, the starting point we're at, so that'll give us some information. And then how are they compared to every other elementary school, if it's a comparable? So, focus internal and external. And that's all I have.